Hi, my name's Jacqueline Lange. I'm a Wefare Rights Advisor at Digby Brown Solicitors. And thanks to Anne-Marie for asking me along today. I'm going to speak about the benefits appeal system. For ease of speaking today, what I'm going to do is assume we're talking about a personal independence payment appeal. But to be honest, the appeal system is just the same across the board for all the benefits. So what I'm saying applies to all the benefits. It's just a bit easier if we focus in on one when I'm speaking. So next slide, please. The first stage of what you need to do is if you have been, let's assume it's a PIP application you've done and DWP have said you're not going to be entitled. So the first stage is mandatory reconsideration. What this means is you're asking DWP to look again at their decision. Now, this is stage one of the process and you must do this. You've got a calendar month to do that from the date on the decision notice you receive. That's the letter that you get from DWP. I've written there that it can be up to 13 months. My advice to you is try your best to get in within the first month because it saves you a lot of bother, really. You've got to have good reasons if you're going to be out with the 13 months as to why you're late. So you want to be asking for your reconsideration within 1 month. You can ask for the reconsideration in writing or verbally. And again, my advice would be that in writing is best and you want to keep a copy. It's a big organisation and things can get lost, so it's good to keep a copy. In this, when you're asking for this reconsideration, what you want to be doing is telling DWP why you think the decision is wrong and providing any supporting evidence you can. Now, it's not always possible to get supporting evidence, so don't worry too much about that if you can't get it, and certainly don't delay sending off your request. The main thing here is to make sure that you're asking DWP to look again within the month. Now, once you've sent it away, DWP don't actually have a time limit to come back to you. Your time limit to get to them is 1 month, but they don't have a time limit to come back to you. And that's because it's an absolutely huge organisation and they get loads and loads of these. So it does take quite a wee while before you'll hear back from them. But when you do, you'll receive a letter and that will give you your new decision and any appeal rights that you might have. So this decision that you get, this might be the end for you because they might say, that's fine, we're changing our mind, we're going to give you the benefit and that would be great. However, they might say, I'm going to stick to the decision that I've already made. And that's quite common. Or they might say that they're going to change a bit of the decision. Now, in that case, you can still say you're not happy with that, or you might be happy with it, but you still get the right to challenge that. Okay, so next slide, please. So if DWP don't come back to you and say they're changing the decision, so you're still not happy, they're still saying no, you're not entitled, what do you do next? Well, the next thing you do is appeal to the tribunal, and that's an independent tribunal. This is you going out with DWP altogether and appealing to that tribunal. So the important things to remember here is the fact that you must have a right to appeal before you go to tribunal, and you'll find that it's on the letter that DWP sends you. They'll tell you if you've got your right to appeal. You also must have asked for the mandatory reconsideration. As I said, that's the first stage in the process. You can't progress without doing that. So you must have asked DWP to look again. And you must have a mandatory reconsideration notice. Now that is sent to you with the letter. You'll get 2 copies of it, one to keep yourself and one that goes to the tribunal. The appeal must be in writing and it must be signed by you. If you're not able to sign for yourself, you have an appointee, they can do it for you. And or you might have a representative that's going to help you at the appeal, and they can do it for you too, but they would have to get you to sign a mandate saying that you were authorising that. So again, you've got another calendar month to appeal. And as I said before, it can be up to 13 months. However, you really need to have good reasons. And my advice is get your appeal in within the calendar month if you can. So there's actually about a 75% success rate as well by going to appeal. So you can see that it's probably quite worthwhile. Next slide, please. Okay, one of the questions I get asked quite a lot is it worth appealing? You know, and I would say always at least consider appealing. It really is worth, as I say, up to 75% of the appeals that go to in front of a panel are actually successful. So it really is worth appealing. You can increase your chances of success there if you ask for an oral hearing. So that means you actually go along on the day and give your opinions over on the day. Really good if you can try and get a representative. I know that's not always possible. You will get good advice from if you contact Citizens Advice Bureau or your local council. You'll find that there's great free advice there, and that the representatives from these kind of organisations are steeped in this. They really know what they're talking about. So if it's at all possible, useful to get a rep. But if you can't get a rep, don't worry too much. By being really well prepared, then you can manage this on your own. I always say to people, you've got a month in which to appeal. That you'll get your letter through. You've got a month in which to get your appeal in. Use that month and use it well, sort of thing. So next slide, please. What do I mean when I say use it well? I mean prepare for your appeal. How do you do that? Look at the decision that DWP sends you and think about what was it that I disagree with. Look for any errors. Are they maybe saying on the forum that you can walk further than you think you can? Are they saying you can cook a meal unaided? Are they saying you can shower alone and you know that you need help? That kind of thing. You're looking to see, is there anything on this that I actually disagree with? As part of your preparation, as I mentioned, it's if you can get a representative, then that's great, because that rep will help you to make your appeal. They'll help you to send your appeal away. They'll help you by preparing for your appeal and by gathering evidence, or at least pointing you in the direction of where you can gather evidence. They'll check the law for you. They'll write your submission, and they would also attend the hearing on the day for you. Next slide, please. So another thing that I think this is a really, really useful thing to do when you're thinking about what you're going to do about your appeal. Start to keep a diary, or at least a wee note for a week or so, noting the difficulties that you've got, how long it takes you to do things, etc. So maybe getting up in the morning, think about how long is it taking me from when I get up? How am I managing to get into the bathroom and get myself washed, dressed? How am I managing to get my breakfast? How long is that taking me? Am I getting help? Who's helping me? And what exactly are they doing? The reason I say this is because a lot of my clients come and they've perhaps lived with a disability for quite a while, and they just become used to it, and they don't actually realise they've forgotten just how much help they're getting or how long it takes them to do things. And it sometimes becomes apparent you've not actually put this kind of information on your forum. So it helps to do this kind of diary. It'll help you. And also if you get a rep, you take along that kind of information, they'll be grateful for that as well. As I've said, it's not always easy to get a rep, so don't worry if you can't get one. You can definitely prepare for it yourself by doing the things that I'm suggesting there. So next slide, please. So what you're doing now is you've looked at everything and decided what it is that you think is wrong and you want to appeal. So what you've got to do is you've got to go directly to Her Majesty's Court and Tribunal Service. Now you'll get that information for where you're writing to on the letter that DWP has sent you. So either you or your rep will complete a form, SCS1, that can be available online, or you can just write a letter that must be sent directly to the Courts and Tribunal Service. You're no longer dealing with DWP. You must include your mandatory reconsideration notice. That's a definite must, and you must give grounds for the appeal. Next slide, please. So what exactly are the grounds? This just means the reasons for your appeal. They don't need to be lengthy. Good if you can just make them nice and clear. It's not enough just to say that you disagree. You really have to give particular reasons as to why you think the decision is wrong. So for example, maybe it's things like, since you've been keeping your diary, you've realised, look, I didn't tell them the fact that I get breathless and I have to stop, and that's what affects my walking 20 metres. You might have not told them about the prompting and reminding that you get in the kitchen. Maybe you're fine in the kitchen, you can actually do quite well making things, but you really need someone there because your brain injury means that you forget stuff, and so you need someone there prompting and reminding you what to do. That's all really important information for DWP to have. So that's the kind of things you want to be putting down, making sure that you're giving the reasons why you disagree with their decision. So Next slide, please. It can take a long time from when you send your letter in, giving all your details of what you think's wrong. You'll get a letter of acknowledgement from the tribunal, and you know then that they've got it, but it will take several months really. And at the moment, I would say it's probably taken in the regions of about 6 months really for appeals to be heard. So you'll probably not hear back for about maybe 6 months or so. So what can you do in the meantime when you're trying to prepare for this hearing? Well, you'll be sent what's called an appeal bundle out. Now that's more known as the Secretary of State's submission. So you'll be sent that because DWP send that to the tribunal, and that's their submission, and you'll be sent a copy. Within this bundle, what will happen is there will be a copy of your application form, a copy of any assessment that you attended, any sort of medical assessment you attended, and also a copy of the decision that DWP used to make, or the information used to make that decision. So it's really good to read through that. Sometimes I've had clients tell me that they didn't keep a copy of their application form, and so this is the first time they see it. And once they've been keeping a wee diary and seeing what's happening, they realise that they really didn't put the information that they needed to into the form. So that can be quite apparent. So when you're doing that, you're looking through and deciding what's the point of your appeal and concentrating that. So you're preparing for this hearing, and one of the main things I would say to you is don't just complain. Make sure you're just giving reasons. There is room for a complaint if you think that's necessary somewhere else, but really don't get into the realms of saying you think the system's dreadful, etc. That's for another time. You really want to concentrate here on getting the information across as to why you think this decision is wrong. Useful at this stage, you've got some months, so it might be useful to start thinking if you can get support and evidence, maybe your GP, if they know you well and they know how that your disability affects you, because it's probably quite important to say for something like personal independence payment, you don't get that benefit on your diagnosis. It's more about how that illness or disability affects you and how you manage day to day. Now, if your GP knows you quite well, they might know that and they can comment. It might be somebody like your occupational therapist that's better suited to do that, or a nurse that you have, or maybe even somebody who works in the brain injury group and knows you quite well and knows the difficulties that you face. So that can be really useful if you can get some sort of supporting evidence like that. It doesn't have to be a report or anything, it doesn't have to be long, a simple letter, but it really has to be relevant and up to date. So that's kind of the main thing there. So next slide, please. I would suggest it's useful to do a claimant submission as well. So DWP have put their submission in, and it will look a bit, when you get that through and you look at it, it'll look very highfalutin and whatever. You don't have to do that. In actual fact, there's no legal requirement for you to put in a submission. However, I've often found that it's a really good idea to do a submission. It only needs to be maybe a page, just needs to be bullet points saying, these are the points I think are wrong, and here's why I think it's wrong. You don't have to be formal. Good to be concise, I think, and it really helps you get your points across. That's going to be sent to the tribunal before you get your hearing, and I think it's a good thing because sometimes if you've not managed to get yourself a rep, then you're maybe going along to this hearing on your own. And it's good. Some people get a wee bit flustered when they're on their own and it's something like that. And this really helps you get your points across because you'll put that into the tribunal beforehand, so they'll have that information. So at least if you get a bit flustered on the day, you know you got your points across and it's not so bad. It's also useful because you'll have a copy of that and you can follow that on the day, and that will maybe help you to not be flustered and kind of keep yourself on track. So I think it's really useful to consider sending in your own submission. Next slide, please. So what exactly is the tribunal? The tribunal is a court of law, but it's not as formal. You're not going to come across judges with wigs and gowns and that kind of thing. It's really not formal like that. The hearings will generally be at a venue fairly near you, so again, that's quite helpful if it's quite easy for you to get to. And the tribunal will be made up of a judge and one or two other members. Next slide, please. So in this situation that we're talking about, if it was a personal independence payment hearing we were going to, there would be 3 people on that tribunal. One would be the judge, the second member would be a medical member, usually a doctor, and the third person is a disability member. Now, that member might be someone who has a disability themselves, so is well aware of disability and definitely knows a lot about that. Or it could be someone who works in that field and again is fairly well versed on that. For appeals like employment support allowance or industrial injuries type appeals, then there's only 2 people on the tribunal, and that's the judge and the medical member. The hearing, I would say, is fairly informal, and I know that's easy for me to say because we go to them a lot, but really being honest, they're relatively informal, and it's more like a discussion. It's just in an ordered manner. The judge will start off and he will chat to you, ask you some questions, and then he'll pass to the doctor to ask some questions, and then the medical member. So it's just really kind of like an ordered discussion. Now, after they're finished asking you the questions, next slide, please, sorry. Yeah, so the tribunal has to consider the evidence that's put in front. So what you say on the day of the hearing is very important. I would say that the tribunal are really interested in hearing what you've got to say, and they will take account of what you're saying. So it's useful, that's why I say it's really useful to get an oral hearing and be there yourself. You might have a rep with you, and to be honest, the rep's there and they keep you on track and whatever, but the tribunal are really interested to hear what you've got to say, and their questions will be directed to you. They'll also take account of medical evidence, if it's from your GP, your consultant, your nurse, whoever, and that's important information so long as it is relevant and up to date. They're not really going to give an awful lot of weight to some report you put in that's maybe 10 or 20 years old, but they're looking for sort of up-to-date information. They'll also look and take account of evidence from somebody non-medical, but if they're involved in your care, they know you well, then they're really useful at being able to see how your disability affects you. That could be somebody like your social worker, your carer, or indeed if you're in a brain injury group, sometimes someone, a worker from that group is well placed to help you out in that situation. Something really important here is when the tribunal are looking at the evidence, that they're only interested in how you were and everything that happened around the date of the decision. So the date of the decision is when DWP sent you the letter saying you weren't entitled. Now, it might be that in the intervening period, which, as I said, could be as much as 6 or 7 months later before you're actually sitting there at this hearing, then you might have got a lot worse. But unfortunately, they can't take account of that at all. They only can look at how you were at the date of the decision. And sometimes that's not clear to people, and that can cause a bit of confusion. So it's worth knowing that they're looking at how you were around the time that the decision was made. So I've answered all your kind of questions now, and you've gone over any evidence, and that's your appeal hearing coming to an end. Next slide, please. So what happens then? So you'll be asked to wait outside, and generally the decision will be given to you on the day. Occasionally it will be posted out to you, but generally you wait about maybe 15 minutes or so, and then you get the decision. The decision will be given to you in writing, so you don't need to worry if you're a bit flustered and you can't remember what was said, because you're going to be taking a copy of that away with you. Both you and DWP have got a right of appeal. This is really important to know, that once you're at the appeal hearing, you've only got a right to take it further to another stage of appeal if there's been an error in law. So I don't find that happens very often because the judge is legally qualified, so it tends not to happen, but it can do. So if you do lose the appeal, then you can ask for what's known as a statement of reasons. That's an SOR there, and that lets you see you can take it further. At that stage, I think you're probably better to try and get yourself a rep by contacting maybe Citizens Advice or something like that, because they would be a bit better placed to help you look and see if there has been an error in law. If you've lost and you accept the decision, then you might feel that your situation has changed, your condition is worse, and you might now, since your condition has worsened, you might actually be able to reclaim the benefit. So that's again something that you could do. However, if your appeal is successful, then you'll get the arrears of benefit. So I'm finishing on a high here. You'll get your arrears of benefit and it will be sent to you directly from DWP. You don't have to really do anything, but I would caution that it can take a while. It's a very big department, we've got many of these appeals, so it can take them a wee while to send your arrears, but your arrears will be paid back to your date of claim. So whenever you put the form, your application form in the first place, you'll get it back until then. So next slide, please. That takes us to the summary. Probably my top tip is always consider appealing, at least consider appealing. Too many people will tell me that they've put in an application and they've just accepted the decision, but in actual fact, when you're chatting to them, you can see they just didn't put in enough information on their claim form. They didn't get across, just the difficulties that they have, or they just hadn't given that kind of information. So always at least consider appealing. Use your month to prepare and really think about it. If you can, try and get your representative. As I say, I know it's difficult to get a rep, but you'll get good quality representation from Citizens Advice Bureau, from your local council, and some community groups also have welfare rights advice. So that's something I would say, if you can get it, try your best to do that. I think the keeping a diary or a wee note, just to declaring your own self how your disability affects you, sometimes actually really lets you see that you should be appealing. So that's a useful thing to do. And remember to focus on the reasons for your appeal. So when you get in that room at the appeal hearing, you've probably got, I would suggest, somewhere 25, 30 minutes tops at the appeal on a normal basis. Then you want to get your reasons for why you think that decision's wrong. Give your examples of the difficulties you have on a day-to-day basis. Don't complain. Don't be telling them that the system is rubbish and that you think it's all wrong. There's a time and a place for that. You can do it after your appeal. On the day, concentrate on your reasons for your appeal. Finally, try and get some support and evidence if you can. I know it's not always possible, but if you can, speak to someone that knows you quite well and is maybe able to give you some evidence that would back you up. But don't worry if you can't get that, because I've known loads and loads of people who have gone to appeal without any support and evidence. They were able to get their reasons across and they were successful. So that's me come to the end. I would just remind you that I've been kind of talking about this from a personal independence perspective, but the appeal process is the same across the benefits. So I would say that it's just as relevant, the information I've given today, even if it's an ESA appeal, whatever that you're doing. Okay, and that's me. If there's, I think my final slide's any questions?
Yes, I do, Jacqueline. So the first question is the judge or medical member of the tribunal supposed to have experience in brain injury assessment? Because I found that the emphasis was strongly on the physical side of the injury, even at this stage.
Well, I've got to be honest and say that's not really the kind of thing that I found. I do find that they are usually are trained in that kind of thing. So yeah, I would say that generally they are trained and they do recognise mental health issues and brain injury issues. They probably should be.
Another one, if I don't have a representative, can I take someone with me?
Yes, you can. That's probably something I should have mentioned. Yeah, you can take someone in. Now, the important thing to say is that person is not probably going to be able to give much in the way of evidence. It's reasonably informal in the tribunal, but they do have to stick to some rules. So that person is really there just as a support for you, and they wouldn't really be able to say very much. As a rule, I find that the tribunal try to be as reasonable as possible, and they will accept some things that the person says, but generally speaking, you find they maybe say to the person, I'm afraid I can't take any evidence from you. If the person you take along does want to give evidence and you think it's quite important that they do, then what they can do is tell the clerk when you arrive that you think this person wants to give evidence, and then you would go in your own, and then that person would be brought in and they would give their evidence then. So, but you can have someone just for moral support, you can have someone with you.
Oh, great. The other one, Jacqueline, is it's clearly a long drawn out process with a lot of appeals. The success rate, which is quite high in favour of the claimant. However, it's very stressful. Do you think sometimes the reason being is that they're hoping that people would maybe give up on their claim?
Well, I don't think.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
I feel at this stage I have to say I did work in DWP myself for a long time, and probably not. That's probably not what they're trying to do, but it can come across that way. It really can. That there is almost 75% success rate at appeal across the UK, so that's pretty strongly in favour of the claimant. So it really is definitely worthwhile trying.
No, that's great, Jacqueline. Thank you so much.